And we should be live now.
Awesome. Hi,
Woohoo.
everybody. Welcome to Meet the Maker. We are live. It is a different time than we're used to. So thank you for joining us if you're in the States a little earlier. If you are abroad, especially in Europe, you might appreciate that we're doing it at a time that is more reasonable. Usually we do this at 4 p.m. Pacific time, which would be 11 and we would go past, or it would be 1 and we would go past, 3. So anyway, welcome, Gina. Today we have Gina, who is the lead developer, designer. You are the person behind OctoPrint, if I'm not correct, or
Yeah,
if I am correct.
if you're correct. Yeah, you are correct. Yeah, that's all right.
It is early.
Yeah,
I just had my coffee.
I could say it's late, but yeah, okay.
Yeah, we
Yeah, I'm the creator and maintainer. I always sum it up as that. So I'm the person who came up with the idea, and I'm also the person who still is taking care of keeping it alive, keeping it maintained, adding stuff to it, releasing things, and so on and so on.
I'm sure that's a lot. Yeah. And I have a ton of questions that I've already written down that I have for you. So Gina, I'm not sure how familiar you are with these streams, but really what we try to do is just connect people in the 3D printing community with the makers that are involved in projects that they deal with or touch on a daily basis. OctoPrint is something that I mean, probably all of us at one point in time have used. If we're not even, if we're not currently using it, we've used it. I don't know if you have statistics on how many people actively use OctoPrint, but I imagine it is a very large number.
I have anonymous usage statistics that are opt-in. So you
Okay.
always have to take these numbers with a grain of salt because obviously plenty of people will not opt in, which I can totally understand. I'm quite privacy conscious myself. But according to those, I'm currently at something like 81,000 instances
Oh,
measured over
wow.
the past 30 days, I think. Yeah, 30 days.
Okay.
And the actual number is probably 10 times as much
I would
because
think so.
that's what I figure from the download statistics and such. Yeah, but it's hard to say because privacy, opt-in, everything like that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think of an application. I mean, those are like the most popular slicer level numbers, I assume. If you're looking at like people are using Cura or using, you know, Super Slicer or any of these things. I mean, those figures are just tremendously high. I can't imagine there's many other people that have, such a close involvement, I guess, with users of the 3D printing community. It's got to be pretty I don't know. I mean, humbling almost. I would just think it's amazing. I can't imagine what that feels like.
It's a ton of pressure, to be honest. Like, imagine the only reason that I actually am here today is because I bought myself a 3D printer back in late 2012 and was annoyed that I had to teaser it to my computer and have it sit there for hours on end, producing noises and fumes. And back then, I was also still running Windows on my machine. And so every update would kill my print. That was in times still when SD cards on the printer itself were quite uncommon and if so, a very, very expensive add on. I started with an Ultimaker Classic. Yeah, so back then I was just annoyed by this whole situation, and the Raspberry Pi had just come out in that year, and I wanted something to just be able to put this printer in a spare bathroom, which I happen to have in this flat, and have it continue to work there, but be able to monitor it from afar. And that is what I sat down to work on over my Christmas break back then, and which I figured, hey, I'm done with it in early January when I put it online, and then suddenly it took over my life. So this was really a case of I just wanted to scratch my own personal itch, and apparently I scratched a lot of other itches as well. And now it is my job. Like I'm doing this crowdfunded. I'm doing this full time, which is also something that apparently plenty of people don't know. But yeah, this is what I do since full time since 2014 and crowdfunded fully since 2016.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, there's also, I think, very few people that are able to support themselves through these types of projects. Yeah, that's amazing. So that's been 11 years? 11 years that you've been doing this? Like, is fully full-time?
Full time. Yeah, initially I was hired by a Spanish technology company who also did 3D printers to work full time on OctoPrint. Like it was like a deal where everything would stay under my control. That was something I was very, very big on. And they basically just paid me monthly, and I would just work from here on everything. And then they ran out of money in 2016, and I was in the situation where I was, okay, this is a huge project that is something I cannot do on the side. Like this is definitely out of hobby space at this point because of the whole amount of support that I have to do, maintenance that I have to do. And I mean, you also want to do some development here and there as well. So it's a full-time job. And so I figured, okay, I never really wanted to take the risk of getting self-employed, but I was pretty sure that if I did not try that now, I would kick myself for the rest of my life and ask myself what would have been maybe.
Yeah.
And so I launched a Patreon. And later I also added PayPal and GitHub sponsors and a bunch of other options. And this, for some reason or another, has been working since then, and I'm probably more surprised about that than anyone else. And yeah, so the user base of OctoPrint is basically paying me to work on OctoPrint and making all of that possible, everything possible that has happened since 2016. And that is pretty enormously awesome and also pretty humbling. And sometimes I just want to hide under my table and
Wow, I mean, with the number of users, I mean, it's almost like, I don't know if I think they do it everywhere, but like on the Wikipedia, where for 2 months of the year or whatever, they have like hey, if everyone just pitched in, 25 cents or something like that, like we would be free forever. I mean, I imagine it's one of those things where most people are not sort of actively funding OctoPrint, but you have enough people
probably
that do.
Yeah, and I also always say that I'm happy for everyone who does, but I'm not expecting it from anyone apart from people who actually use it commercially. That's like, I mean, it would be a good idea to support whatever you're building up on, right?
Would this be people like in print farms or something that use it?
Yeah, I don't know how many there are, but in general, I think just if you are making money from it, then maybe it would be nice to also give back some of that. And but it's also something that I don't have written down anywhere. It's open source. It's not something that is legally necessary. It's just something that I think is, in general, if you use open source to make money, then maybe try to support whatever projects you are building on there. That's also what I try to do wherever I can.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. How and we will ask things that are not all related to OctoPrint because we also want to get to know you. But I mean, obviously this has been your full-time job now for over a decade, so it's probably a big part of your life.
Yeah.
How are you, if you had to estimate how many hours you put into OctoPrint on a week? On an average week?
I would say I try to stick actually to a 40-hour week because for a long time I did 5 days per week with a target of 8 hours and then usually running over 1 or 2 every day, ending up at something like 50 or more, which was quite unhealthy.
Yeah.
And so these days, I mean, I'm my own boss. I have to take care of basically staying able to do all of this because no one else will. And so what I now do is I do 4 days per week. With my Fridays are usually free, with a target of 8 hours as well. And if I overrun those, I usually then end up at something like 40.
Yeah.
But there are weeks where I do more. There are weeks where I do less when you know, these days when you cannot really think straight. Not being able to think straight is really bad when you're trying to code. So if you force it, then you will spend the next week in trying to iron out the bugs that you put in the week before.
Yes.
So when I run out of other stuff that I need to do, like accounting is a big thing now as well, being self-employed, sadly, all of the tech stuff and such. And yeah, some other orga things when they are not an option in cases like that, I just call it an early day and instead try to put in some more hours on a day where I can be more productive. It's all just trying to figure out a way to keep this going without it making me sick one way or another.
Yep.
And pretty much being there the long term, being in for the long haul.
Do you have, I guess, do you have like a release schedule or when you push things through to make sure that you can stick with that? Or do you have times where you're like, oh, shoot, I released something and I didn't realize something else, something else broke or something wasn't caught on beta. And now I've got to like spend my weekend working on stuff. Are you pretty
I have a strict rule to never do releases past Wednesday.
Okay.
Because I was in this situation a bunch of times, and this sucks. And so now I never release on Fridays, of course. Now that they are free, I don't in any case, but I also don't release on Thursdays. And the idea is if I push out something that is in some way broken, which was not caught by the quiet, long release candidate phase that I always have in front of every stable release, and I still have Thursday to react to that. And if push comes to shove, Friday, but I definitely won't have to do that on the weekend. And I'm also like, me being here on a Sunday evening, my time is something very unusual for me because I'm very, very, very protective of my free time, of my weekends, of my after hours, of my vacations. Because once more, if I'm not, no one else will. And long haul and all of that. So yeah, I have strict rules about my time off and my time on, and I sometimes break them for special occasions, but usually I don't.
Well, I'm very, very appreciative that you did break it for this one. What do you do outside of OctoPrint? So you do obviously, if you keep it to 40 hours, you have a little bit of time to do other things, I hope. Are there any hobbies or anything like other like that you have?
Plenty. A bit too much, too many maybe. So I'm a gamer first and foremost.
Oh, cool.
These days mostly on the Steam Deck because for the longest time this hobby suffered a bit by me spending the whole day in my office working, and then somehow I didn't want to spend the rest of the day in the same office playing. So when I got myself a Switch back in, I think 2017 or so, that somehow became my primary system. But these days it's the Steam Deck. Ever since that got out, I was in the third delivery in Europe. Actually, I pre-ordered it very fast back then when it came out.
Yeah.
And that's my primary system now because it allows me to play basically everything, and I have a whole backlog. So,
are there any games that you just really love that you find yourself going back to?
I really need to do a replay of Mass Effect at some point. I also got the re-release that came out, I think, 2 or 3 years ago, and that is also a very, very important game for me. I'm not sure if I would say it is my favorite because I do not have one favorite. I have plenty of favorites, but it is definitely up there. That and Subnautica and XCOM and The Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild, primarily actually, but also Link to the Past has a special place in my heart because that was my first Zelda and also the first game that I ever bought for myself back then for my Game Boy. I'm also a fan of point-and-click adventures. I really love puzzles. Currently, I'm playing Dave the Diver, finally. I just finished playing Dredge the other day. So plenty of indies, actually, these days mostly. But also the one or other AAA.
Cool. Outside of gaming, is there anything else?
I boulder 2 times per week when health permits. So rock climbing.
Yeah.
That is a really good thing to work to do against all of the sitting and this hinging over on the keyboard and such. And also it does something with my brain, trying to solve these problems on the wall with my with my body, basically. Like it triggers the similar reward regions in my brain. I think that coding does, just that I'm doing sports in the meantime, which is quite amazing. I enjoy cooking. I recently started painting miniatures again, though for board games.
Oh, cool.
I also enjoy playing board games. I used to play pen and paper RPGs, but then COVID happened and all my groups disappeared. So, but now I've found solo RPGs to be a nice alternative.
Okay. Any particular games that so are you printing like and painting like figurines and stuff for your games, or just?
Yeah, I just finished painting the figurines for my copy of, what was it called again? Subterra. That's a co-op dungeon crawler, basically, a bit. Maybe imagine Descent, the movie Descent, but as a board game. I'm a huge fan of the Nemesis board game series. And we recently also got ourselves Cthulhu Day. How was it called again? Something might die. Yeah. I'm misremembering the name right now.
No,
but
it's
anyhow,
okay.
A Cthulhu miniature game from
I'm sure
Cummings or Not,
knows.
which is a ton of fun. I really prefer co-op games these days, where like a story also somehow emerges from the whole thing. Like even if you fail, they are usually a ton of fun because the way that you fail is amazingly funny. Like at some point, I was doing a run of Nemesis with my partner and a friend, and the ship started to burn. And at first, we were fine with everything, and then it started to burn more and more, and we were not able to get the fire out anymore. And then also the alien queen spawned, and the ship exploded, and it was a ton of fun. It was a very short session, but like, the story that emerged there was like, if you imagine that in your head as a sci-fi movie in that moment, that was just hilarious. A hilarious run of bad luck.
It's awesome. Shammy said you should look into Stargate RPG if you like some co-op games. I think the issue with gaming is that there's just never a shortage of games that you can play, right?
Yeah.
And you do have a shortage of hours in a day.
Yeah, I also have the Mass Effect board game that came out last year, and I still haven't managed to actually give it a try. So that's the usual problem.
Yeah. Do you have, okay, so you also mentioned cooking, and I'm a huge fan of food. Is there a dish that you're like, is your dish, like you're like, if I make this, it's top notch, it's the best?
I'm a huge fan of pasta in general.
Okay.
Like, yeah. So anything that involves tagliatelle or spaghetti with a ton of Parmesan and and some sauce or the other. I also try to do more pizza. That's usually just, I have a small kitchen. I have a pizza steel. I also have a pizza peel. The problem just is that most of the kitchen afterwards is covered in cornmeal. So that's always something that has to be balanced. Like, do I want the mess more? Do I want the pizza more than I don't want the mess? Something like that. So yeah.
Yeah, we make a rule of whoever doesn't cook gets to clean. So it removes that whole hesitation.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. Maybe I should do that.
Except my wife doesn't like that too much because I'm the one that always makes the mess, apparently.
Using cornmeal for underneath.
Yeah.
The other thing you can try is parchment paper.
But not on a pizza steel. That would prevent the full crust from forming.
So what you do, because I do pizza indoors and outdoors on my grill with a pizza stone. So what I do is you put the dough on the parchment paper for maybe a minute, which is just enough for the crust to start.
And then you pull it out.
Then put your peel in between the paper and the crust, almost like a magic trick. Pull the paper out, and then the crust is fully contacting your stone or your steel. It works really well. You don't have to do cornmeal at all.
I'll try that because the cornmeal is really a big hindrance for me.
Yeah, you feel it in your teeth.
No, that's okay, but like having it over the kitchen, that's a problem.
Oh, yeah. See,
Yeah.
we have a pizza oven that's out that we put outdoors. But the problem I have is I still, even with the cornmeal, I still end up getting it like sticking, and it's hard to, because you take the thing, you take the pizza out and then you leave it for, I don't know, 30 seconds before you like spin it a little bit more. And every time I do that, I end up with like pieces of pizza that end up being stuck in the oven, and it's just all messy. I have not perfected my pizza making skills.
I actually visited a course in a pizzeria
Really?
5 years ago. So yeah, that was fun.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. I love pizza. That's
pizza. I think pizza is something that is universally loved, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, there's not many people. I know. It's like when people say they don't like it, you're like, you kind of like look like, really? You just like, not at all? I mean, I can see it like not being your favorite food, but like, how do you not like just like it? Have a baseline like level of interest in it. But there'll be somebody, I'm sure. So back to OctoPrint. If there from where it started, you said that you kind of finished in, I think you might have mentioned when you first released it in 2012 or 2014. In that time frame, you were like, hey, I'm done. Like, what changed where people are like, hey, can I add this? Or was it you saying, hey, I'm using it and now I wish I could add this extra feature? What that evolution look like?
Yeah, it was basically just me suddenly getting emails from all over the world from people like, hey, it's great. That's something that I've been looking for, but it doesn't work with my printer. Can you make it work with my printer? And then we got into this whole back and forth and trying to make it work with that. And then people came also in with things like, would also be awesome if it did this and if it did that. And then, of course, I was also working with it and noticing things that I would prefer to add because, they would make my life easier. Also things that I added because I thought they would be fun, like the time-lapse feature. That was something that, to be honest, I rarely use myself, but I just figured, hey, I mean, I have this webcam anyhow now because this was one of my initial ideas. I wanted to be able to view this thing from afar because, the firmware will usually not know if the print just detached from the bed, right? So this is something that I want to be able to see with my own eyes. And then if push comes to shove, intervene. Back then, we also did not have any sensors on the filament at all. So it was also a case of, is there a knot in my spool? Is the filament still going? Things like that I needed to see in order to know. And so I had a webcam anyhow, so I figured it might be fun to just take snapshots from that and stitch them together and have the print basically just, grow out of the plate. And then people said, oh, that's awesome because I usually print overnight. And then when I come back in the morning and the print has failed, I often don't know why. And now I can just have the time lapse and take a look at that and maybe see what went wrong. And that was never something that I intended with that. It was supposed to be a gimmick, but hey, we're great.
They make really cool videos. Yeah, it's one of those things I never really use either, like maybe once a year, but I do love watching the videos, and I totally can see that it being super useful for the evidence of being like, yes, this is where it failed, or this is what happened. Yeah, that made the spaghetti in my printer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, then Brad came in and made Octolabs, and that, of course, put it up to 11 because then for this specifically, he asked me to build something into OctoPrint where it would pause the print so he could inject commands to move the printhead to some specific position, take the snapshot, then move it back and such. So that is how that happened. And so the Octolabs time lapses were even more awesome than the regular ones. And I've also enjoyed watching those over the years.
Yeah. One thing I remember, and I do use OctoPrint, but I honestly, it's been one of those things, and props to you probably for this. I haven't really had to touch very much. So like I still use it, but I don't really mess with things too much. But one of the features is that there's a lot of plugins, and there's been a lot of plugins. How do you deal with that in making sure that it doesn't impact functionality of sort of your core product?
That is a very, very good question. So the thing is, first of all, I realized very early that I had to build in something like a safe mode that would disable all third-party plugins so that people could, if a plugin messed in some way with OctoPrint, still just boot into a safe mode of OctoPrint that only contained core code, so OctoPrint itself, plus any of the plugins that I bundle with OctoPrint, and that way get back a functioning setup that would allow them to disable or uninstall the offending plugin.
Okay.
It's also something that is required if you report a bug on OctoPrint, because I also had it a bunch of times that people reported a bug, which then turned out to actually be a bug with a third-party plugin, not with OctoPrint itself.
Yeah.
So to rule that out, I now tell them, run in safe mode. If the problem vanishes, it's not in OctoPrint. It's something that you have installed that is a third-party plugin.
Yeah.
Oh,
no, and then I assume the instruction to them is talk to the developer of that plugin.
Yeah, that is something that has to. I mean, sometimes it's a case of maybe an unexpected interaction with a change in OctoPrint that I did not anticipate. So another big challenge with having a plugin system like I have is I have to keep the platform very, very, very stable, because I don't think that many people would enjoy writing plugins for something that basically changes the API that they write against every half a year or so. So I've gone through a ton of pain to make sure that that doesn't happen and that the API stays stable, even if that means that I have to put in a ton of workarounds for problems that I could easily solve without having to look at it to take care of that. Just to make sure that stuff continues to work. But sometimes when I put in a workaround because I have to do some internal refactoring or because I have to fix a bug or something like that, then it turns out that some plugin was using something that I touched in a way that was undocumented, in a way that maybe was documented, but in a detail that was something they thought would just stay this way forever, and which was an implementation detail. And then I have to look into how to solve that. Is this a case where it is easier to just change this single plugin, or is it something that's more widespread? In which case I have to figure out how to solve it, because yeah, I cannot expect 200 plugins to get updated because I changed the parameter name somewhere or something like that. So in that case, I just try to be, I just try to make things easy for the community, basically. Though it usually means more work for me.
Are there examples where you've basically had to, or you've decided to keep in sort of old code or old ways of doing things, and as you've moved on to new things to make it easier, or are you
plenty constantly like? Thankfully, I usually anticipate this stuff, and I don't have to then hurry up to fix a problem or something like that. For example, in the current release, I've switched OctoPrint to auto escape everything that is in its templates, so that it is more difficult to inject stuff in there, which is a security thing, basically. The problem is that auto-escaping a template, of course, means that it behaves differently. In OctoPrint's core and in all of the plugins that I control, that is not a problem for me, because I know that I did that and I just changed everything so that it continues to work in the new versions that will roll out with the new OctoPrint release that is now imminent. But for all the third-party plugins, I cannot guarantee that. So I had to spent a lot of time into figuring out how to change the templating system that I use, which is a third-party dependency, so not something that I came up with, but figure out how to use that so that I could wrap third-party plugins into something that would tell the templating engine, and now don't do auto-escaping for that. And I thought I had figured that out when I rolled out the first release candidate for the upcoming release, but then it turns out, nope, because apparently that for some reason broke template macros. I have no idea why things were designed the way they were, but like 2 days of a deep dive into the template code of this third-party dependency, I understood why and could work around it. But yeah, that's stuff that eats time.
Yeah. Was there somebody asked if there was sort of a big event or a problem that happened that made you make the safe mode disable third-party plugins and stuff?
It was quite early when I rolled out the first release that had plug-in support, I think in 2015. That must have been, I think 1.2.0 that came out in 2015. And quite soon, like within the first month or two, I had a bunch of new issues in my issue tracker that then turned out to actually be caused by the maybe 2 handfuls of plugins that existed at that point. So one or the other that broke things in hilarious new ways. And that was basically it was not one specific case. It was more like, okay, that needs to get a solution because this is not going to work otherwise. And that's also why I made this part of the bug report template to test out in safe mode, because I mean, I understand if there is a problem, it needs to be solved. But if it's a problem in a third-party plugin, I cannot solve it. So it needs to be reported to someplace else. And that is basically less a way to allow me to push back against this bug, like not my problem, and more a case also to help the user understand where the problem lies. Because I also explain in the template, so if this is if this goes away, then this is a problem that you need to report to whatever plugin is causing that, because then it's not OctoPrint. In general, I try a lot in OctoPrint to inform users about problems they encounter, because I also had it a bunch of times that people were like, OctoPrint is saying something about thermal runaway. And no, it's not OctoPrint, it's the printer. And this disconnect for plenty of users is something that I try to iron out with a new error prompt or error dialog also that I built into the last version of OctoPrint, where it actually tells you your firmware reported the following error. The reason, or the most common reason for this, can be found here in the FAQ. These were the last lines that were sent to and from your printer, and you need to solve this in your printer. This is not OctoPrint's error. Of course, this still requires that people actually read that, which is a whole different problem. But
yes, we've learned you can't rely on that.
Yeah, I know. I know so much. I know.
But at least you can point people to the part that says you should read this thing, or
Yeah.
But it still takes time. I guess I'm curious. So, I think again, plugins I feel like play a big role. Are there examples of either plugins that people came out with that you're like, okay, yeah, this should just be part of the core OctoPrint, and I'm gonna make this sort of part of the core system? Or have there been examples where you see plugins that maybe are not actively being developed that you want to see sort of pushed further, and you've taken over any of that stuff?
Actually, the latter, and just with the upcoming release, because we had 2 quite nice plugins in the community maintained by someone else. One for a big file manager. So usually all you have for managing your files in OctoPrint is this little sidebar, and it doesn't allow you to do a whole bunch. Like it's tricky. You actually can copy and paste there as well, but it's a bit messy. It's really small and there's just not much space for a good UI there. So one of the third-party plugins that was really nice to solve that was a file manager plugin by Mark Hannable. But yeah, he simply doesn't have the time anymore. Like it's been pretty much abandoned for 2 or 3 years now. And with the upcoming OctoPrint 1.11, I now said, okay, I'm going to bundle that. So I looked at the plugin. I basically rewrote most of the UI, turned it into its own standalone dialog that can now be launched over the file manager, over a button that gets injected there. It's still a plugin, so it's still something that people can just disable if they don't want it. That's also something which I do a lot. If I add new functionality, for example, if I added when I added the achievements last year. That's something that I always do in the shape of a plugin, because plugins can be disabled if someone doesn't want, for some reason, the kind of functionality that a plugin provides. They can just disable that. So I ported the file manager that way, and the same plugin author also had something to configure a core feature of OctoPrint that has been in there since version 1.0 or 1.1,
Oh,
so
wow.
very,
Okay, so
very
very
long, but
early.
never was exposed on a UI. And he wrote this UI, and so I figured, well, then I don't have to expose that in core, because there is this editor that he wrote for that, which is basically for custom tooling on the control side. So you could define a button that sends some G-code or a whole G-code script and then a slider or something like that. And so that was also unmaintained, and that is also something that I now pulled into OctoPrint as a bundle plugin, and that I also heavily rewrote in the process to make it easier to maintain.
Cool. Awesome.
But usually I try to push stuff away instead of taking over more maintenance, because it's one person here and
yeah, that is rough. So it is just you that does the core OctoPrint.
Yeah, I mean, I have some support now from the community, of course, also when it comes to managing the Discord, managing the forums, also managing the plugin repository, which I'm really grateful for. But when it comes to the actual development, there are some PRs, so pull requests here and there, but most of the work is done by me.
Okay, wow. Yeah, I mean, that's a big responsibility.
Yeah.
What have been some of the, I mean, so I'm going back here. I actually was just checking out some more plugins. I mean, there's stuff going on way back, and I mean, there's things that, I mean, I started, I think, in 2015-ish, and I mean, I was using OctoPrint probably from 2016. So I mean, there's been a lot. What have been some of the, I guess the biggest changes or major releases that you've done? And I'm also curious, because a lot of the people in our community are also fairly new. What are some of the things that are recently changed? And do you have already ideas for things in the future for OctoPrint? That's a very big question, by the way.
That's a very big question. Yeah, so let me start at the first one, maybe. So the big things.
Sure.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's like, I could say now one of the biggest push that I had to do was getting OctoPrint compatible to Python 3, because that was a big change that happened. But this is something that the end user normally didn't really notice, apart from it suddenly being maybe a bit faster if they installed it under Python 3, because Python 3 in general is way faster than
And you
Python 2.
sent out, I mean, I think I remember this. Wasn't there like notifications and pushes that like don't users have to upgrade? And like, I mean, I remember all of these things, and I'm the person that like ignores them. And then like at one point, I think, I don't know if I just finally said okay, or it just stopped working. I don't remember, but
it
I
probably
remember
continued to work, but you did not get any updates anymore, because at some point I just have to pull the plug on that. And that's something that I actually now have to do as well, because Python 3.7 is now end of life for almost 2 years now. And I have the same situation with that now. It was way easier this time to make things compatible, but we still have plenty of instances out there that run of that. So OctoPrint 1.11 will now also display a little notification about this problem. I've built a health check into OctoPrint now that will check for outdated Python versions, will check for outdated OctoPrint versions, will check for if your disk is running out of space, things like that. But yeah, that's more like helping people to keep their things updated, basically. Really big changes. Well, one thing that I remember was like a case for me, maybe where I went, okay, enough is enough. I don't know if you remember, but back in 2018 or so, we had a bunch of cases where some printers burned down houses.
Yeah.
And all of these printers were printers where thermal runaway detection was disabled in the firmware, usually thanks to some cut corners with regards to costs and such. And after one too many of these news, I decided enough is enough. And that is when the firmware check plugin happened that is now bundled in OctoPrint for ages now, which checks when you connect to your firmware, when you connect to your printer. OctoPrint checks against some known patterns of the firmware name, the firmware version, and also, of course, the capability information from the firmware if it has this implemented, which sadly usually isn't necessarily the case with old firmware, and matches that up against known firmware problems, which can be this firmware does not have thermal runaway check enabled, and that might burn down your house. But it could also be something like this Creality firmware here has a problem with temperature messages where stuff is broken in a way so that OctoPrint cannot parse it, but you can just install this plugin in order to solve this problem and things like that. And yeah, I've seen a surprising amount of pushback about this plugin. Like, why do you think you need to warn me about stuff like that? And like, yeah, because I think it is good if you know that your printer can burn down your house. Sorry.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
yeah,
it's one of those I'd rather give you a message if I knew I could than and have it be, nothing than not do it and find out that, your house burned down.
Yeah, it's surprising how angry people get at you when you try to keep them safe. Like, not by preventing them from doing anything, but just like displaying them,
Giving them a heads up
about problems.
Yeah.
Okay, but yeah. What other things? I mean, there has been so much happening in there since 2015. I added several new UI plugin types, like a UI plugin where you can replace the full UI basically with something else, which sadly never anyone has done so far. But apart from a laser company in Munich in Germany who uses OctoPrint to run their laser cutter, and they have their own custom UI in front of it. Yeah, the webcam embedding code is now also in a plugin that was actually contributed by someone else. And yeah, plenty of plugin types, really. The whole idea really is that in general, if someone requests a specific feature that currently isn't possible to do in OctoPrint, I'd rather look at what is needed in the shape of some kind of plugin hook or API or something to allow this feature to be implemented through a plugin rather than me putting it into core, unless it's a very, very core specific feature. Next version will also have two-factor authentication as a plugin type, for example, so that you can code something up there in order to make things more secure. Yeah.
Cool.
A whole ton of stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. Have there been, so I mean, and I'll say, well, actually, there's a question. I'll ask that first because it maybe leads into it as well. Somebody was asking, sort of based on your anonymous usage data that you have, does it give you information as far as like what's the approximate makeup of like different kind of machines or anything like that, so sort of
very roughly? Like I see the firmware identification basically, and you can also take a look at that yourself at data.octoprint.org, because there is a little UI where you can look at the data exports that I generate every hour, I think, from a cron job. And somewhere down there is also a firmware overview, but that is only firmware. I don't know necessarily what kind of printer is behind that firmware, of course. I mean, if it says Prusa Marlin, then it's probably a Prusa printer, but and if it says Creality Marlin, it's probably a Creality printer, but that's about it.
Yeah, this is awesome. Sorry, I'm checking out the site now. So yeah,
no problem.
Also gives you that the number of unique instances that was quoted earlier looks like is there as well. You can see the distribution. I am probably in the 1.1-ish range. One of those like oddballs that need to update really bad, like the the 10.0. That's cool. Yeah, this is really sweet. Oh, and look at that printing duration of all prints the past 30 days, 186 years. That's amazing. This is cool. I did not know about this site, and I will keep checking this out. Have you seen any trends through the data that you've got, or just through talking to people, as far as what people are doing or what people are using?
It's seasonal. Like
Okay.
I definitely see that there is more activity during the coldish months on the northern hemisphere than during the warmish months. I also see an increase in activity usually before Christmas and before Halloween.
Okay. Yeah, so people start printing a bunch of
And
stuff
a
for gifts or
tiny one
whatever.
before Valentine's. So there
Oh,
is some activity there.
cool. Yeah, look at this. There's people running on Raspberry Zeros and 3As. Okay, cool. Sorry, I can get lost in this.
Yeah, data can be kind of fun. I totally get that. The first time actually that I saw numbers from this anonymous usage plugin that I think I pushed this out with OctoPrint 1.4-ish, 1.5-ish. I honestly don't know. Maybe it was later. I honestly don't know right now. But that was like when I saw the first numbers coming in and the usage numbers rising and rising and rising and rising. That was actually a point where, like, I don't know, maybe 4 hours after the release, and I'm not joking, I hid under my desk because
Well,
for the longest time, I didn't know about any numbers. I had a rough idea because I saw how many bugs were being reported after release, or also the one or other download number here. But a download doesn't necessarily mean that there is also an installation associated with that, right? So I simply didn't know. And then these numbers started coming in. And back then, I think it was something like 40,000 or 45,000. And I had expected maybe 20. And so, yeah, it was just, it is a ton of pressure on my shoulders because I know what the responsibility that I have, that mistakes that I do can actually cause problems in the field for people outright up to security problems.
Yeah.
And it's like imagining all of these people in a room means the room has to be very, very large, and that makes you feel very, very small all of a sudden. So, yeah.
I can only imagine the pressure. I get anxiety sometimes just doing these things, and this is nothing compared.
If it helps, I still get that as well. So that never went away, no matter how many live streams or talks or whatever I did. So yeah, like I still get nervous.
Yeah, I imagine if I was, have you ever just been like, hey, this release is good, nothing critical is broken, I'm gonna take a break. Like I just need to like decompress a little bit, and I'm gonna go off for like a month and take a vacation.
A month? No, never a month. I mean, what I actually did, like, I don't know if you noticed that or if you heard the news about that, but last year in July, I actually discovered a manipulation of the anonymous user stats by 2 plugin authors who used this manipulation to get their competing plugins up in the stats, so
really?
that I'm commercial plugins. I was
Of course.
very happy about that. And that cost me like 2 weeks or something of trying to get all of the crap out of my stats again. All of these not existing instances and all that was also really great for my for my motivation, basically, to see the numbers back then were 145,000.
Oh wow. So like it was a huge difference. They were
it was a
manipulating.
huge difference. And that was like, you look at that and you feel like those were never real instances, right? But it still feels like you just did something horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You half your users decide to abandon the platform.
Exactly. It felt exactly like that. I knew that it wasn't the case because the actual users were still there. It was just the fake ones that I threw out. But still,
well, you feel
that
like you
was
made an achievement, right? Like you've got 140,000 people using it, and then I imagine I don't think you can change that. It's just how you would feel of like, you lost something somehow.
Yeah, it sucked really hard. I remember when I first found the first one manipulating that, removed all of them. Then I was, I think, at 109,000 or something. And then I found the second one. And I knew that would push me below 100K. And that starting the script to delete all of that felt horrible, but also it needed to be done, right? I mean, it was all fake.
Yeah.
So that made me angry beyond belief. Actually, talking about that still makes me angry beyond belief. And thankfully, I already had a vacation scheduled for like a week or two after that anyhow. I also had a conference, a Python conference to go to in the meantime. So what I did right after I did that, I pushed out an OctoPrint on air where I explained all of that. I pushed out a bunch of blog posts detailing everything that happened, also telling who it was and also telling that I had invoiced both of them. They paid, by the way, and like for the work that I had to do to clean up their mess, basically. And then I also posted in the last post at the bottom, basically. So I'm now going to take a break. I have one coming up anyhow, and I need that because right now I was really this close to just throwing in a towel and saying F-bomb it all because it hurt. It hurt so much because like getting abused in that way. I mean, I don't have these stats to make myself feel good. I rely on them, and that is also why there is so much data about the environment, about the Python version, about the underlying hardware and stuff like that. I use all of this data to make informed decisions about development on OctoPrint, changes in OctoPrint, whether I can drop certain versions or not, how big of an impact something that I do will have. And if I cannot rely on that data, then I'm basically flying blind.
Yeah, totally.
And having that manipulated in that way, and I only noticed it because one of the plugin authors one of the plugins was manipulating it in a way that there were a ton of really ancient OctoPrint versions being reported. And that felt like, I mean, I know people sometimes take a while to update, but at some point, this ancient OctoPrint version was the primary version, the majority.
Yeah, and you're like, there's no way.
And that was like, okay, something is weird here. And then I started looking closer and
did you do some investigation, like look up online, like if there's like some community that are like, oh, this is some amazing thing on this old version that
I was absolutely sure that I had somehow messed up my data in some way because all of this tracking is built up on a stack on a tech stack that I built up myself because of all of the privacy situation in Europe and such. I really wanted to make sure that this data is on only one server that I control in only one software stack that I control. So and I was absolutely sure something was going wrong there. So I really did a detail hunt down into the data. And that was when I noticed that there were just things in there that could not work. Like OctoPrint versions reporting a Python version which they could not run on. Yeah. And that was when I realized, okay, something is going wrong here, and started looking at the IPs that were sending all of that stuff. And that was when I noticed something was really wrong because there were some IPs there that had like thousands of instances attached to them. And that, I mean, I have seen print farms with 100 or so, but not with thousands.
Everything from the same servers kind of thing.
Yeah.
How long did that go on, do you think? Like how long were they doing it?
2 years, something like 2 years.
So, I mean, I'm sure that also makes you feel upset that, I mean, I'm guessing a plugin was able to commercialize their cheating.
Yeah. Two plugins. I mean, two competing plugins. It was like both of the major remote access monitoring thingies.
Interesting. That's awful.
Mm-hmm. The result of that was that now, if you're a commercial plugin, you will no longer be listed in the top 10.
Oh, cool. Okay. So you got a way to say, hey, if you want to try to manipulate this, you could do it, but it's not going to benefit you. So
It's not even in the data export anymore. I introduced tagging of plugins for that reason. And anything that has some kind of commercial backing will now get a commercial tag. It's still listed in the plugin repository. You can still find it if you search for it, but it will no longer be getting any kinds of numbers attached.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Yeah, I'll have to check to see if I'm using those plugins.
Dig up the blog posts. They are quite prominently still, I think, in the archive. So it should be easy to find which ones. I don't want to.
No, totally. That's probably a good idea. Do you know what sort of the oldest instance that's still running of OctoPrint is? Is there like
I'm pretty sure it's something that is still running under Python 2.7.
Okay. Wow.
I'm also pretty sure there's probably some out there that predate the tracking. So
yeah, because I mean you could completely run them basically offline, right? They just need LAN access.
That is also it's like I intentionally made it so that it can run completely offline. It tries to phone not home, but actually to the update service of, or rather to the GitHub API to figure out if there's a new version and stuff like that. But if it can't, it will detect that and not try that. So
interesting. Very interesting. That's do you have statistics on sort of regions that the OctoPrint's being used?
I used to just wait for the first little point to plop up in the Antarctic because that was the last continent that I was missing in my collection. But yeah, so basically it pretty much I used to have that. Something broke in my Grafana setup that made the map stop working where I had this locked. But it basically used to be the general population thing. Just matching that. Like, for example, in the US, a whole bunch on the East Coast, a whole bunch on the West Coast, and then a sprinkle in between. So
yeah, kind of where population is.
Exactly.
Interesting. Okay.
In Germany, there was a huge cluster somewhere in one area, and that really confused me for a while until I figured out that this is actually the location of the endpoint of one of our national ISPs for their IP for the internet stuff.
Okay, so everything's funneling in there, and it's showing.
Yeah, because they have a CD, how is it called again? Like a NUT on their side, a CNET.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Cool. Have you seen? So I don't know. When you came up with OctoPrint, I assume at that time there was nothing out there, right? There was nothing.
Yeah.
That you could
I mean, there were some things that basically treated the printer as a black box, like it sends G-code in there and hopes everything works.
Okay, but there was nothing that was like
no back channel, like no, yeah.
Interesting. And I mean, now it seems like, I don't know, it seems like it's everywhere, right? Like if you have a Creality printer, they're giving you Creality print, I think is what they call it. And I have a Cheaty printer, and they have something now that is, basically showing similar things. If you have a Clipper printer, default mainsail or whatever. So, I mean, you're starting to see sort of this proliferation of, I guess, what was your original idea. How have you seen things change in the last, I guess, since you started?
Things are going more proprietary again, and that worries me.
Yeah.
Like, the thing is, if you buy a printer these days, the chances are that you will probably get something with, how should I call it? Because it's not Clipper. What is on
it's their own like super Clipper, right? They took out things and added things, and
and that is something that worries me because they're making it intentionally or unintentionally incompatible to any kind of third-party stuff. It's you usually don't have access to a serial anymore, so it's hard to actually talk to the printer itself. I mean, if it's Clipper, then of course the printer itself is something you don't even want to talk to. You want to talk to the Clipper endpoint, but you cannot. Plenty of these printers are locked down. I actually have a KDE Q1 Pro sitting next to me here myself. Yeah. And that is quite open. But what I heard about plenty of offerings from other vendors where you are unable, without rooting the thing, to even access whatever is in there. And then you have to imagine with like one of the dumb old printers that have a serial connection, that have a simple microprocessor in there, 8-bit, maybe 32-bit, but still just a basic processor that controls the steppers and accepts G-code over a serial or from an SD card, and that's that. They are dumb. You don't have to worry about them too much with regards to security, but of course still with regards to safety. But with all of these network-enabled printers, you're inviting them into your network. They are a black box. You have no clue what is running on them. Personally, I have trust issues there. So even the Kitty, even though I have full root access to that and have run a PS-EF and check what is running in there, this is sitting in my virtual LAN that is completely kept out of the internet because I don't trust this thing further than I can throw it, and it's heavy. I cannot throw it very far. So and that is something that is also, I think, plenty of people out there are really forgetting, because this is the same thing that I'm also heavily into home automation.
Totally.
That plenty of people simply ignore. Like, if your light bulb suddenly has an IP and you don't know what kind of software stack is running on there, and this light bulb has internet access, you have no clue what it is doing in your network.
Oh, totally. Well, especially when you're dealing with, I mean, I've really avoided the Wi-Fi smart home stuff that are basically operating with their individual, controller and everything. Because that scares me. Because they're always from a company that their name is Alphabet Soup, and you have no idea what they are.
Even if you do, I mean, it's a case of it's my home, and it's my network. I don't give anyone who happens to come across the street there my Wi-Fi password. So why should I do that to any company just because it says, hey, my light bulb is cool? So I have all of that stuff that has Wi-Fi sitting in this IoT VLAN that I have in here. And the only thing that this can communicate to is my DNS, NTP for timekeeping, and my Home Assistant endpoint so that it can talk to my stuff. But that is all. And that is how I like it to keep it. And
I think we're getting into an area, certainly for the printers like you were mentioning, where things are fairly locked down. With the Clipper offshoots is a little difficult because a lot of them are also running stock fluid or mainsail. They're not doing anything fancy on the UI part.
And they cannot really lock that off. But
and you go to update or machine, and you can't actually, if you click any of those things, you will probably brick your printer for a little bit until you reflash. It's a thing that I don't think they've figured out. And then as you were talking about just sort of the Wi-Fi enabled everything. If you look at other industries, and I think 3D printing is probably is heading that way. If you look at your television, you look at your printers. Now, if you buy a new printer, it says, hey, you're running low on ink, can we order that for you? Kind of thing. And the TVs now they're not making as much money from the sale of the TV, but they're doing advertisements on the screens and all of that stuff. I don't think it's a big offshoot to go into, your bamboo slicer or whatever and start seeing hey, it looks like you only have 200 grams of this PLA left, can we send you some more? Or there's things like that I see as commercialization.
Or just getting an OTA firmware update that says, oh, by the way, from now on, we will only accept filament spools that are from us.
Yeah, we have the RFID that are authentic.
They are already set up for that. It's also something where I'm just why do people not see this? It's all over the place. We have what is now has this nice name, enshittification, and for some reason in 3D printing, people just throw all caution to the wind whenever they get promised some shiny new things. And this is something that is making me extremely angry over the past couple of years.
Yeah.
Because, okay, maybe I'm a bit paranoid here, but that doesn't mean they aren't going to do all of that. And the writing is on the wall in some ways or another already. And so anyhow, long story short, I feel like we're doing some big steps backwards in 3D printing with regard. We get awesome new stuff. with regards to functionality and features and whatnot, but I think we are giving up a whole bunch of freedom for that. And that worries me because I don't know if I still will be able in 5 years' time or so to buy a printer that I actually want to use.
Yeah, no, that's difficult. I mean, I'm hoping, you get more into the back. I mean, there's been backlash. I mean, the recent like bamboo changes, there's been backlash. I mean, I think unfortunately a lot of the people don't care or they're so desensitized to it. They're like, it's in everything we do, and like I just don't care, which is a lot of the comments. But there are a group of people I think, like yourself that do, and there was a lot of backlash that now, I mean, printers are actively promoting, and Cheaty's one of them. I mean, they're actively promoting like, hey, you know what? You can do this on Ethernet and you can do it in LAN mode, and we don't do anything. We don't have servers that are, things are reporting back to. Hopefully there's enough of that pushback that it will hopefully create a wall, I guess, in that area that people can be successful behind. Well,
Yep.
sorry, there's some kids outside my door. That's the problem about doing this at home. Alan, if you have any questions, I'm going to mute and get my dog to stop barking until the kids go home.
Okay. Yeah, because then it'll probably be my turn to talk to the dog about barking. But I'd love to hear more about your experience.
I think your audio is a bit disturbed right now.
Is it
or is it just me? I'm getting some cutouts and repetitions. I think that might be what you mentioned before.
It's awesome. Could you talk about your Python experience and being a GitHub star?
Yeah. Okay. So then I'm going to do the talking. You're just going to listen. Yeah. So Python experience. Yeah, that actually was. I used to be a sysadmin back at my first job, and that was when I discovered Python for basically just easy scripting in order to make my life easier as a sysadmin. And then, yeah, I got into this industry, became a Java developer, completely forgot about Python. Not completely forgot, but basically it was no longer part of my day today. And then OctoPrint happened. And back then I was looking at options on how to do the serial communication with the printer, which I had absolutely no clue about at all yet. I had no clue about G-code. I had no clue about this protocol that they somehow put around it, fiddled around it. And so I was looking at options, and one option was Node.js for that. And another option was Python. And back then, the problem with Node.js was I was still on Windows back then, and the serial support under Windows was an absolute disaster. And so instead I figured, okay, I know Python, I'll just try it with that. And hey, look at that, Cura actually is written in Python. And hey, look at that, Cura has something that talks to a printer and talks G-code and knows all about that. And this is how Python happened basically and became a bigger part of my life again. And this is also why parts of OctoPrint that are very old still look like they are written in Java. Because during my day job, I was still writing Java during this time. And so all my variable names are in the wrong case, in camel case, and yeah, it's a bit bad, but it's just how it happened. Yeah, and I really have come to love that language, I have to say, though the whole Python 2 to Python 3 thing was a bit horrible. But I've also been at some conferences now, and the Python community is really, really awesome. Made a ton of friends in there as well. Also plan to go to one, maybe two this year, PyCon Italia and EuroPython. And I also happen to be a Python Foundation fellow. Yeah. Which I don't know why and how that happened.
What does that mean?
Python Software Foundation is basically the foundation that is at the head of Python and manages this, and they honor people who have done some great work in the Python community with this fellow kind of thing. It's basically something that usually you get for a lifetime. It's just it says that my work on OctoPrint in that specific case, and making all of this community and having all of these plugins implemented in Python and such, and using Python in that way was apparently something that was awesome enough that they recognized it with that. And I also happen to be a GitHub star, which is a program that GitHub does for open source or in general GitHub users who have shown a very strong leadership skills, community building skills, have done a lot with the platform. And I guess that happened because I utilize GitHub heavily for OctoPrint's whole update process workflow. Everything in GitHub releases and the testing and everything like that is fully CI scripted on GitHub Actions now that they have that as well. And that has also been really nice because it gave me this direct contact to the people at GitHub to tell them when they are doing stupid things with the platform, which I'm also doing whenever I need to. So yeah, that is quite nice to be recognized in that way.
That's cool. I'm wondering, are there any, we ask this question a lot, but I'm always interested because I think you have maybe a different perspective. Is there anything that's going on in the 3D printing space that you're particularly excited about?
I think the worry currently is too overwhelming to get excited about things, if I'm honest.
No.
But I'm still hoping that at some point we will see more closed loop systems that are actually in more off-the-shelf stuff, because right now I still find it quite annoying that if I get some kind of misstep, that I get a whole layer shift and the whole print is broken. So it would be really nice if we could maybe get to a point where this can no longer happen. Yeah. But that's more like I've seen the writing about this on the wall since, 10 years now, I think, when I saw the first news about a closed loop system on some printer, but it's still not in commercially available units, or at least not in some that I can afford. So that is something that would excite me a lot if it actually happened.
Yeah. Do you ever get printer manufacturers, suppliers reaching out to you to see if you can do something for them?
No, not really. Like for a while, I had some of them here and there reach out when they got warnings or when their printers were warned about in the firmware check plugin.
Oh.
Like, can you please remove that? No. Fix it and then it will self-correct.
Yeah.
And that worked out a bunch of times. And I also get the occasional question from some company or another if I can maybe collaborate with them on something. But usually that is like, first of all, I don't have time. Second of all, if I don't see that, if I don't see a direct relation to what I do, I also don't really see why. And for the longest time, I also got a bunch of situations where people were like, hey, can you please help me promote my Kickstarter for this and this printer? And I was like, no, I don't do that. I don't recommend printers. I don't promote printers out of if I say I have that and that printer, then that is a case like I bought that with my own money. And that is not any kind of ad or something or promotion. I really do not want to touch anything like that with a 10-foot pole, if possible at all. Because then someone will go like, Gina said this and this is awesome, and no.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's got to be difficult. And you're trying to represent software that is, sort of out there for everybody and doesn't have a preference.
That was tricky when I was still employed by that technology company, because they were selling printers and plenty of people were like, oh no, OctoPrint is only going to be supporting these from now on. No, never.
Yeah, you don't want the pressure, but it sounds like that was a good relationship. It sounds like they sort of knew their lane, or you created lanes that made that.
I had them put that into the contract and everything, because that is something like, if you tell me such and such will be this and this way. Yeah, nice. But I need that in writing because otherwise it's not, no matter how much I trust you, I need that in writing, you know, like.
Totally. Yeah. Were there ever times where you were like, had to point back to that and be like, no, we can't do that?
I sometimes had to, like, I never had to really pull the contract out and be like there, but there were some discussions back then with my line manager where I had to tell him, you know, I understand why you want that, but we have to find a way to make this work for everyone and not just you.
Yeah.
Because otherwise this doesn't make sense. And this is not something that I can sell to people. And it is also not something that I want to sell to people because it's just not how I work.
Is 3D printing a hobby for you, or has it become like, because it's work now, you like don't want to do it as much?
I would say it's a tool. Like I use it in hobbies. Like I got into bookbinding last year and print and play making and such. And also yet now for the miniature painting, I printed myself some stuff to stack my paints on and such. Like for me, it primarily has always been a tool. I was never a person who went like treating the printer itself as a hobby. For me, it is a tool that has to work, which is also why unreliable printers annoy me greatly. Yeah, so I consider it a tool just like my vinyl cutter, my whole resin stuff, the laser cutter behind me, like my solder station. It's a tool. It's a tool in my tool bag that I try to make use of often. Being able to know how to get around in FreeCAD also certainly helps. Yeah. So I'm a maker first and foremost, and not a 3D printer.
So do you do some CAD work and do some of your own designs?
Yeah, but like whenever I have some kind of problem that I need to solve, I first look if I find something online that works for me. But if I find something that is not entirely to my liking or so, then maybe I get inspired by this design, or I just do something from the get-go. Like when I bought myself an e-bike now 3 years ago or so, I wanted to have 2 D-locks on that because an expensive e-bike, better have 2 locks from different vendors so that if someone who tries to get it and has a key for one doesn't have the key for another, but I needed a way to mount both of the D-lock to my frame. So I designed myself and went through several versions before it fit and all of things. I designed myself a frame for a double D-lock holder that I can just mount to the bottle holder from underneath on the main frame. The main frame, well, you know the
frame of the the bike.
And secure both D-locks that could push through holes and then get with a bit of tape get locked and don't move during cycling and such, but it can easily access them and pull them out and use them and stuff like that. Really, like when I buy something new. Recently, I got myself a new vacuum cleaner, so I printed out a whole bunch of stuff to mount all the different adapters now to my wall for this vacuum cleaner. Like it's not really exciting, but it excited me because it worked.
It solved the problem.
Yeah.
Do you just have the one printer then that you use?
I usually have one main printer. So currently that's the Kidi Q1 Pro that I got just before Christmas. Before that, it was a heavily modified Prusa Mark III. And there's also some others around that are in different shapes of usability. I actually just... when I usually at the start of the year I do a deep clean of some part of my apartment, and this year it was the built-in closet, and in that built-in closet there was still my very first printer.
Oh really? What was that?
An Ultimaker, and give me a quick.
Yeah.
Because I felt really bad about throwing it out.
Oh, you can't.
I also really felt bad to let it keep up space.
Oh, so you did.
I solved it that way.
Oh, nice. Oh, that's awesome.
Right? So this is the very first thing, and this is also the very first Raspberry Pi there.
Yeah.
That OctoPrint was running on with this card.
That's amazing.
So I mounted all of that in this frame. Yeah, and I have this basically right behind me there on the wall. And now it's fallen over. But
No, the glass didn't break or anything, did it?
I don't think it's glass, to be honest. It was a very cheap frame. Also, I'm out of focus. Now I'm in focus again. Okay. So yeah, I did that, and now it's history and hanging in my office. But in the basement, I also still have a very old how was it called again? US company, very small printer. In the first version was in wood, the second version was in metal.
Oh,
Around 2013, 14.
oh, somebody's got to know this.
Company went down, I think something about 5 years ago or so. Or maybe 6 or 7 actually.
Is it the printer bot?
Yeah, a printer bot.
Yeah,
a printer bot simple. Yeah, I still have one of these in the basement. And I just gave an old Ender 3 to my buddy because he also has one and he's going to use that for parts.
So, it doesn't look like a great printer, but maybe it is.
I got it as a gift from the company for my work on OctoPrint, and it was great because it fit on my desk without taking up too much space.
Yeah.
As a test printer, it was perfect. Because I have to keep a printer next to the desk basically to be able to quickly test changes when I do them to OctoPrint's COM layer, so that I can immediately test them against the real printer if the virtual printer that I have built in doesn't work out for that. And yeah, that was something that worked even better than the current solution, which is like a 5-meter USB cable that I can attach to things.
Yeah, these are interesting. Yeah, no, I really do like the sort of the wood frame, and it looks like it was laser cut, so it's like you have all the little burn marks.
I painted mine completely in, so it looked like walnut. So
oh, that's awesome.
Lots of work though, gave me a horrible back, but it was worth it. It looked amazing.
That's awesome. Yeah, we have it on display. It's E3D Big Box that they did. They did something very similar. I mean, obviously it's much larger. And I love the look. I just imagine it was very inefficient to do it that way. But yeah, interesting. Yeah, so you've been, I mean, and this is, yeah, this looks like, I don't, yeah, but 2013, 14 is a while.
It's old. It used fishing line for the movement, so instead of of the usual stuff, like it was really creative, really low cost build, like these little Dremel things that you use for these little rolls with the paper on that. No, I'm losing the English words right now, but for sanding stuff, these sanding rolls.
Yeah.
That was used, that fishing line was wrapped around that, and that was used to move things
no
on the
way.
axis. It worked. It worked amazingly well. I still have some stuff printed with that in use to this day, and it really looks good. Like there is no big problems with the printed walls here. Like I printed this stamp for my patrons when I sent them cards that I can print the OctoPrint logo on there. And that was printed on this printer bot simple back in the day.
Really? That's cool.
I had to sand it a bit, but yeah.
Any issues with like that line breaking? And I mean, I guess it'd be easy enough to replace, but
surprisingly enough, not. I actually bought a roll of replacement, and I found that when cleaning out that closet, still completely unused. So it held up. Maybe it's broken now. I haven't looked at it in ages because it's just I got a little box with it, and I put it in that box and put it in the basement. Like, okay, maybe one day I will decide what I will do with you, but for now you'll just sit in here and don't take up space in the apartment. But yeah. I hope there's no spiders living in there, though, come to think of it. Maybe someone else will have to throw it out when it's time to do that.
I want to be a little cognizant of time because we're at about an hour and 20 minutes. I do want to maybe pivot to some trivia questions because we've got some people who've been on stream here for a while. We are going to do something a little bit different. Just because we do occasionally have people from outside of the States, we are offering a gift card, and we'll just do it like a $25 or 25 euro gift card if you're in Europe to Alchemy 3D for anybody that gets any of the trivia right. For anybody in the States, we just added some new dart blasters. So a nice 3D printing project. We will give away one of those. And then we always do filament, so we'll do some filament too. If you are in another part of the world, we can figure something out. We'll find somebody. Gina, I think you have some trivia.
I've got 3 questions that I've prepared. Yeah. Perfect. Okay. So then let's see. The first one is, how long have I already been working on OctoPrint 100% crowdfunded? And for anyone attending the stream from the get-go, that might be an easy one.
I wrote down the answer. And yeah, there's always a little bit of delay too. So we got 9 years, which would be right, I guess, right? If they did
that sounds okay. Yeah.
So I think the answer was, if I wrote it down correctly, it was 2016. It was completely crowdfunded, right?
Yeah. Since April, actually. So this April it will be exactly 9 years, but in general, 9 years is okay.
Perfect. All right, Brian Twist, you got that one. So shoot an email to info@west3d, and we'll get you set up. And I guess you can choose, because I didn't say what's for what. So we'll do this the whole time. So you can either choose a dart blaster kit, or you can choose 2 rolls of filament, or if you would like, you can have a gift card to Alchemy 3D. So, and I just realized I was on top chat and not live chat. So that is still the right answer. Brian is the one that got it first.
Ooh.
We've done it before.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you have a second one?
I have a second one. What is the difference between OctoPrint and OctoPi?
We didn't even talk about OctoPi. I am on live chat right now. So now we're just dealing with the delay. Software versus Linux distribution.
Yeah, I think we can let this count. Yeah. So OctoPrint is basically the thing that I do, which is the thing that the Python server with the web front end that actually talks to your printer and does all the thing. And OctoPi is a custom OS, basically a custom Linux distribution built on top of the Raspberry Pi OS specifically for Raspberry Pis. And that has OctoPrint in there. That also comes pre-configured with some stuff, also as a webcam server. And OctoPrint is maintained by me, and OctoPi is maintained by Guy Scheffer.
Yeah, and if you look actually on the that data.octoprint, I believe you can look at the distribution of that, if I'm not mistaken, and you will see that, yeah, a lot of people are running this on a Pi.
Yeah. The problem is that plenty of people think they can only run it on a Pi, and that is simply not true. But yeah, that's lots of people also mistake OctoPrint with OctoPi, and they come like, OctoPi is showing me this error. No, OctoPrint. And this error is, by the way, from the firmware. So I like to...
OctoPi is just the OS image. That is.
Yeah. Genau. Exactly. Yeah, that was German creeping in there just now.
And I think, on their server environment stats, they have an operating system number. It doesn't actually say whether it's OctoPi or not. But I would assume that most of the Linux distributions are really Raspberry Pi, OctoPi.
Not all of them. So there's I think I have some distribution there between Linux. I also list Raspberry Pi, and I also list OctoPi. So you can see the rundown, I think.
Okay.
I actually have to check it myself.
Yeah. That's the Raspberry Pi related stats. I mean, you could add up all those numbers also. Maybe, hold on. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff.
Okay, there is no total number. If I put this in there as well, you would see that not all of the Raspberry Pis are actually running OctoPi, because plenty of people these days are also now using OctoPrint deploy, which is maintained by another person. which is a script that will install OctoPrint in multiple instances if needed, with multiple webcam servers if needed, on a run-of-the-mill Linux distribution for you. So you basically just have to install whatever Linux distribution you want, and then you run OctoPrint deploy, and that will take care of everything else. And there's also a limited amount of people running it on Windows, actually, because Jim Neal also wrote a little Windows installer for it. So, and we even have some people running it on a Mac and on FreeBSD. So
apparently 106 in the last 30 days.
I also just added in 1.11, I also just added some additional kind of tracking of the OS platform string that will allow me to filter out people who are actually running it on a Linux, running on an Android phone. So that is something that I will add, because there's also this Android app called Octo4A, maintained by yet another person, which basically bundles a Linux environment inside this app, and in that OctoPrint is installed, I think also with a webcam server, but I'm not entirely sure right now. And so if you have an old phone that has an USB OTG connection to your printer going, you can use that to drive your printer instead of buying a Raspberry Pi or something. That was very common during the chip shortage, when people were not able to get their hands on Pis anymore. And quite helpful for that.
Yeah, I was looking. And there's a bunch of, I was trying to figure out what I use for clients. So I mean, that's the other thing too, is do you have relationships, or are they simply just plugins that I'm looking, like I've got Octopod, but it looks like, I mean, I just typed in OctoPrint on my iOS store, and there's like 6 probably different clients.
All of those are unofficial. There's no official thing. So like I try to make things easy for people by not changing the API and such. And I'm also always happy to communicate and collaborate with anyone who has problems with their third-party client. But we've also had it a bunch of times now. The people came on the Discord, I'm having this and this issue with the app. And we're like, there's no app. What are you talking about?
That does have to be difficult to manage, just because I'm sure it's constant. And when you start dealing with people that have thousands of users, they're going to start complaining, and you're like, it's not.
We had very angry people come in. I bought the app. Okay, maybe you should complain to whoever sold it to you, because it's not me.
Yeah, well, and that's rough too, because I mean, you're also like, at some point you probably feel like your reputation is entwined with third parties that you don't have relationships with.
Yeah, that's also why. So OctoPrint is actually, because of this company that employed me in the first place, they wanted a trademark on that. And I said, it's okay, but I want the rights to that trademark should anything ever happen. And I have this trademark now on OctoPrint. And that's also why in the trademark rules for the use of the term OctoPrint, there's this rule that if you are not allowed to basically just prefix something with Octo to make it appear like it's official, and a bunch of these apps predate that.
You have to say it's also for this.
You always have to make clear that your app is in no way official, or your product is in no way official, unless, of course, that is something that we have worked out and it is different. But then you would have would have a contract or some kind of legal agreement. But as long as we don't have that, these are the rules, because I really want to protect my brand here, and in a way also my own reputation, because that is pretty tight to the brand, right?
Yeah, totally. So I mean, I think I know the answer, but is there any functionality that is only available to people that are sort of paid members for OctoPrint?
No, that's something that, first of all, it would be really difficult for me to implement that. But it's also not something that I want to. I mean, if push came to shove, I obviously could, and I would find a way. But frankly, it boils down to the thing where I said I don't want to force people to pay. I mean, if they think this is worth it, $1 a month is nice. If everyone would pay $1 a month, I would have no issues at all. I could even hire some help, which I currently can't. But I totally understand that this is not something that everyone can or wants to do. And hiding things behind a paywall, I don't know. I mean, I do things like this OctoPrint on Air thing that I do monthly or bi-monthly or so, this live stream, or not, former live stream, now basically just a one-take recording that I push up. I push this out for my supporters first, and then a week later for everyone else, so that they get this information firsthand, and then everyone else gets it as well. And sometimes I also still do things that I do for everyone live or so. But in general, I try to just make it clear that OctoPrint keeps on going, and I keep on working on OctoPrint as long as it is financially feasible for me. Yeah. It is not in my hands to make this that way. That is in the hands of the user base, which is why I also need to, and that is something completely against my nature, but this is also why that is something that I need to promote. I need to tell people, hey, by the way, I'm doing this full time, because I had this big funding call last year when it started to look really bad. And the biggest feedback that I got during this funding call was, I didn't even know. And so that was the point where it's like, okay, maybe I was not that clear about the whole work situation for me here than I thought. And that's when I actually built this achievement plugin, because I figured, okay, that is maybe a nice way. First of all, it was a ton of fun to implement that thing, and to think up fun achievements you could collect. But it also gave me a chance to put a little reminder in front of people whenever something nice happened. Like, for example, you complete 24 hours of successful prints with OctoPrint, and now you get an achievement for that. And then it says, oh, by the way, you can also support me. You don't have to do that. It's a plugin. You can disable that. But it is, I think, a nice way to have something fun. I know that particularly one hidden achievement that I'm not going to spoil here now is something that has brightened plenty of people's days now when they got it. Yeah, as I said, it was also fun to implement, and sometimes I also need something fun to implement and not just something that feels like a chore. Still, a surprising amount of pushback on that one, where people screamed at me, how could you spend time on that? That's completely unnecessary. And then it was like,
you're like, well, do you want me to? You're like, yeah, I can either spend time on this and we can keep doing this thing, or we may not be able to do this thing anymore.
Yeah, and that's just it's hard to get this into the head of some people.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's and you're not asking for a lot. Go ahead.
Third question.
Oh yeah, let's go for it.
Yeah. I I didn't want to have the chat sit there like, come on, continue talking and finish. I want the third question. So let us get this out of the way first. Final one. What unusual sports equipment do I have standing next to me in my office? And it's out of the frame now, but it's there.
Is it going to require a hint, or you think people are going to be able to maybe
It's something that people who follow me on social media might have heard about, or people who have watched OctoPrint on Air or seen me giving a talk about a specific subject that I've given a lot of talks about. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's a hard one. It's not something that I've mentioned here now today.
Do you have access to the chat stream, or should I read these off?
Read them off. I don't have it open right now. And I'm not sure what will happen if I open it. Huh?
Alan knows the answer. I'll let him do it.
Alan knows the answer.
And someone's asking for the question again.
What unusual sports equipment do I have standing next to me in my office? And I'll give a small hint. Normally, they are hanging. But mine is standing.
I don't know this one. Nobody, Alan?
Not yet.
I'm disappointed. People,
I did like the idea of a luge being there. Or
I think we can give it to Chamois with punching bag.
Yeah, we can. I mean, it's a
is it
heavy
one of the
bag.
standing units?
It's not a punching bag. It's a heavy bag. So it's really one of these usually it's these big leather things that hang from the ceiling with a lot of volume that I have a freestanding version and it is sitting right next to me in my office.
Oh, cool.
And
do you
that
use
is
it
actually
when a user
yes,
says that
that is
OctoPrint's
precisely
broken and you're
why,
like, no.
yeah, and that is entitled users that come over very aggressively are actually the reason that I got that, because I noticed quite early in this weird career of mine that when people make me angry, or rather when people are entitled, it makes me first and foremost very, very angry. And while I'm in this very, very angry mood, it's not a good idea for me to reply to people, because then the situation will just escalate, you know?
Yes.
That's not going to help anyone. It's also not making for a quiet, nice community. And that is one of my main goals. I want to keep things in a nice, professional, right? So I figured, what can I do to get rid of this aggression? Punching is something that I lean towards. So I got myself a heavy bag and a pair of kickboxer gloves. And whenever I encounter a situation where I notice, okay, I'm getting really angry right now and I need to get this out somehow, then I just put the Doom soundtrack on and go on it.
Nice.
And that's like, it takes maybe a minute or two, and then I'm completely out of breath. But the anger is like, I still am, of course, angry, but it's not this.
You don't have that like pent up energy that you want to go out and like
the energy is out,
online.
the adrenaline is out, because I also give a talk about that, which is called How to Deal with Toxic People, but which basically was the idea for that talk was, how can I put a photo of my punching bag onto people's projectors. But in the end, the idea there was that once you understand how the stress response cycle runs, because like if you have this, your brain interprets any kind of microaggression or toxic behavior towards you as a threat, like if it was a saber-toothed tiger in the bush. So that's the same thing, because we are still in a stone age in our brain. And if you don't react to that in any kind of way where you actually move, your brain will think you didn't get the memo and will just amp up the adrenaline and everything else. So you will get into this whole cycle where you're feeling worse and worse from minute to minute. And to combat that, the easiest way is to just move. Physical activity in some way. And so punching, running, whatever. And for me, punching works really great. So
yeah. Does your punching bag have a name?
No. I also don't pin pictures of people to it or anything like that. If this is the next question, it's really just some guitar riff heavy music and get to it.
Go to town. That's fun.
I also have a very nice full looped GIF of myself punching that bag, which I sometimes post in a joke under comments. I never actually post this into an issue.
Like an argument that you're about to have.
Yeah, because I don't want people to think that that is a threat. But I'm quite proud of this GIF because it is actually a perfect loop. Like it's just me punching and punching and punching and punching.
That's awesome.
It's really great to make people laugh in certain cases. So that's where I put it to use.
Well, and that hopefully lightens the mood for everybody too.
I usually find that it is definitely good for everyone to make people laugh rather than make them angry or something. So I usually try to lighten the mood when I can, but at least in any kind of argument that already is there, I at least try to keep it professional. Like if someone really behaves like an a-hole, then and they don't apologize or something when they are shown the boundaries, then I obviously will throw them out anyhow. But I usually give people a chance first. And I've gotten a surprising amount of apologies out of that, I have to say. Like where people then realize, okay, that maybe was not the best kind of way of mine to behave. And sorry, I was just frustrated. And like, okay, we are all humans. I get it. But please remember, we are all humans.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's one thing too, where, you know, you're also you. You're not a corporation where someone can be like, you know, disassociate because I'm just a wheel on the cog. Like you are the entire thing. And so I assume it also is difficult because they may not they might not get that. They're not used to interfacing with individuals that
that's
way.
a big problem. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
But even then, I mean, I also used to be in a corporation, and if a customer would have talked to me in a way and made suggestions that I have gotten in my life as an open source maintainer, then that would have certainly had some consequences. I can tell you that. Like I've been told basically from people over problems they had with an update that only they had with an update that maybe I should consider taking myself a rope and, you know.
Wow.
So that's stuff where the punching bag comes really handy. And I mean, it's in theory, that's also something where I could get, where I just could get the cops involved. But still, people forget that the people that they talk to on the internet are people. And even if it is an employee of some corporation, that doesn't give you the right to handle them like they are your personal slave or like they are garbage or something. They are still people. So.
Yeah. I'm guessing, you do have a really active community and you have a lot of active supporters that hopefully in those moments, at least can give you the pat on the back that, sometimes you need.
Yeah, I can, but that also took a surprising long amount of time to get to that point. The thing is that if it is kind of normal in open source communities to see a certain kind of toxicity thrown at maintainers, and a lot of people just blindly accept that as well. It is the way it is, and we will not be able to change that. And my personal opinion is we can change that. We just have to say no. Like, I don't accept this kind of behavior. And I think by now I've also taught my community that we should in general not behave, not accept this kind of behavior. So when something like that happens on a Discord or in the forum or so, people now do the needful without me having to step in. But on the issue tracker, it's still often that I am the first one who sees it, and then I have to react. But it happens more and more that one of my mods on the Discord who also have the necessary rights on the issue tracker and such will step in, tell me on Discord, Gina, don't respond, I'll handle it. So yeah.
That's nice. That's nice. So one of the, and I'll, because we are getting now sort of towards the end, one of the questions that we always ask is if you were, because, again, this is for people in the community to learn about other people that are in the community that have amazing projects and that interact with people sort of on the daily basis. If you were to watch one of these, is there anybody that you would like to see on this that you could learn more about?
I'm not sure if he wants me to say that, but I'm still going to say it now. Have you already invited Mitiyu from Mainsail?
We have not actually. I want to say that the suggestion maybe has come up, so let's go ahead and.
No.
Awesome, cool.
Because a really nice guy. We met at a German CCC event 2 years ago, and another one 2 years ago, and we will meet again at another one this year. And really great person. Like lots of shared complaints about being an open source maintainer and doing all of that. So yeah.
Oh, totally cool. Yeah, I think that would be that'd be a really good choice. And again, another one that a lot of
if he has time, of course. I don't know, like he's.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
It's always optional.
Maybe don't tell him that I told you. No, I'm going to warn him, but.
No, that's fair. Cool. Yeah, no. Gina, first, does anybody have any questions? We are monitoring chat, and if anybody has anything, I don't want to like cut anybody off. But Gina, occasionally we do get questions that come in afterwards, and I'm hoping it's okay if we do have anything, Alan reaches out to you and asks.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. One question. I actually don't know how to pronounce your last name because obviously there's German letters. And I looked up like what looks like the funny B, which is I guess a sharp S.
It's a sharp S, yeah.
but can you pronounce your last name?
Yeah, I actually even have an MP3 on an OGG file on my own website saying me saying my name, because this comes up a lot, and it's Häußge.
Häußge.
Häußge. Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Awesome. Cool.
So Gina Häußge.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to ask, but I was a little embarrassed at the beginning, but
No, it's totally fine. I mean, that's like, my name is tricky for everyone. The Germans struggle with the Gina because it's an Italian first name.
yeah.
And everyone else struggles with the Häußge because it has an ä and it has an sz, and both of these are, at least the sharp s, the sz is something that I think is only in the German language. And the ä, so the umlaut a, is I think also in other languages, but quite common in ours. So and people just they usually can still somehow guess how the a is probably going to be pronounced. So it kind of turns into a how.
Yeah.
But then the S throws all of them off and they go with the B. And so I end up being Gina Häußge. But no, it's Gina Häußge.
Yeah, and those are different.
Which is why I also say, just call me Fusel. That's fine. I also recognize that.
Yeah. Can I sneak one last question in here?
Yeah, no, please. We have 10 minutes, so yes, go for it.
Yeah, I was going to ask. Fusel.
Yeah.
So why?
Why?
Yeah. So have you ever read User Friendly, the webcomic?
Don't believe I have.
So there's this little thing that is basically a conscious ball of flint with very big feet that came out of some dust that was found in a server. And that is called the dust puppy. And I found this very, very cute. And the German word for lint is Fussel. And so this is where we come to this. The dust puppy is the reason why I came up with Fussel. But Fussel is something that I figured that is not like, that's not nerdy enough, because it's just a German name, even though a quite cute one. And then I came across this metasyntactic variable foo, which is part of this whole foo, barf, nord stuff that people give their variables in example code if they don't know how else to call it. So FOO. And then I just combined the two, Fusel. The only problem with Fusel is that now it's the German word for very cheap booze, which is kind of
You're like, that's not what I was going for.
that's not what I was going for, but thankfully the majority of people encountering the name don't know that because they don't speak German. And those that who do, I just tell that I don't drink alcohol and that was not what I was going for there, and then everyone laughs and everyone is happy. So but yeah. Fusel.
Yeah, that's I wouldn't have guessed. I'm guessing that that became part of the German language after you made the name.
The Fusel, you mean? No,
Yeah.
no, that's now. It was more like when I came up with that name, I was wondering, is this a problem? And I just liked the name so much that I decided, it's going to work. It's written differently. I also write it with a lowercase. The German thing is uppercase FUHSEL, so written completely differently. It's just the pronunciation that matches. So I figured, okay, that's going to work somehow. And thankfully, most people don't
associate with liquor.
Don't seem to associate me. I wouldn't even say liquor. I mean, it's like really cheap booze.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Doesn't even deserve the title.
Yeah, definitely not. Like no.
Gosh. Have there I guess somebody was asking about OctoClipper. So that's a plugin, right? So that's something
I think that it could. Is it yeah, that was a plugin, I think. Yeah. I was just confusing it with that because there's also an OctoPy build with Clipper and OctoPrint on board, but I think that was not called OctoClipper, but OctoPy Clipper or ClipperPy, or I have no idea. OctoClipperPy? Yeah, I think it was OctoClipper. It gets confusing with all of these names.
I mean, I guess that's also a challenge too. When you have the plugins, they're naming their own plugins, and so you also, I mean, I'm guessing that's also hard to keep up on things.
Absolutely. I think we are currently at something like 380 plugins, and for some time I was still able to keep up and know what we have, but at this point now I'm like, I have no clue. Thankfully, I have mods that also take care of the plugin repository. And when someone does a request on the issue tracker of OctoPrint for a feature, one of them will usually remember, oh no, that is already a plugin, and then post the link, and then I can say, okay, there is a plugin. We don't have to implement that. Yeah. But yeah, it gets complicated. But yeah, so what about OctoClipper?
No, I think someone just wanted he said, do you want to talk about that? He's like, I don't know if everybody knows about it. So I'm guessing, one of the things for people that have Clipper machines is they're used to having a lot of the capability sort of available out of the box without.
Yeah, there are plenty of people who think that Clipper and OctoPrint are mutually exclusive, and that is like mind-boggling to me, because no, one is firmware, the other is not. I mean, in theory, of course, if you also add Moonraker and then Fluid or Mainsail or something, then you have an alternative stack. But just OctoPrint and Clipper are not mutually exclusive. In fact, for the longest time, OctoPrint was the preferred front end for Clipper. And also people try to insinuate that there is some kind of war going on between me and the others, and like we are just. I know the maintainer of Mainsail, I know the maintainer of Fluid, and we're just shaking our heads over that. Like we all respect what all of us did. We are friends. Some of us even have met in the real world. So I really don't need any kind of war, stupidity things there in the community. And I also don't need people going. Like I've heard it from a bunch of users now who came from the Clipper Discord into our Discord. They were like, I asked them a question there, and they only told me, stop using OctoPrint, that's shit. And we also had some cases in our community where people were bashing Clipper. That's just insane to me. I don't need that.
Bandwagoning, on their. Yeah, I mean,
tribal wars, this us versus them mentality, that's completely stupid. We all just want the same. We want to improve the whole 3D printing situation and make the tools easier to use for everyone, and that's all that we want. I really don't need to prove that I'm better than anyone. Like, if you like my stuff, use it. If you don't, then don't. And that's it for me.
Yeah, and I mean, I assume, you're. What OctoPrint is really doing. I mean, it's pulling information that the firmware is generating or the printer is generating and displaying that and controlling and making communication to the printer, right? Yep. I mean, it's
trying its best to enhance the stuff that usually the firmware is able to do less than that which you might want to do, like detection, notification, all of that. And that was my goal, to enhance this situation. And that is still my goal. Like,
it sounds like, OctoPrint is for 3D printers. That's the thing. It's for the machines. I mean, you don't really care if it's Marlin or.
That was also like I'm currently. I only announced this in the OctoPrint on Air that I put out for my supporters last week. So this is completely fresh yet, and not yet official on officially published on anything else. But I got this KDQ on Pro specifically to be able to test a new refactored communication wrapper that I've put into OctoPrint over the course of the work of 2 weeks, which was surprisingly fast. Like 1 week before Christmas, 1 week now, and I still have some work to do. But I hope that this will allow me to talk to more printers again. Like currently I'm pretty focused and pretty pushed into this whole serial communication thing, but with this work that I did in there, it will be possible to develop plugins that talk to Moonraker, that talk to whatever Prusa comes up with, that might even be able to talk with whatever it's getting late. The words are getting tricky. Proprietary interfaces come with the printers in the future, because this development towards closed down stuff worries me, and I want to make it possible. Want to keep it possible for people to use whatever they want with their printer and not be locked into some horrible vendor lock-in. So that is the idea here, and basically this KDQ on Pro is the first test subject for that.
Are there risks? I mean, you've got, obviously there was the big hoopla over Bamboo and, how that was going to sort of locked down Orca Slicer, and then they were like, no, it's not. But Orca Slicer's, hey, I'm not gonna go through all of this stuff.
Understandable.
Yeah, I mean, is there a risk with that approach that other vendors do that kind of thing?
You mean like locking down things further and
Yeah, so
requiring
it makes it
I mean,
difficult to
of course, and
communicate.
that is actually
Sure.
what I fear. But I'm also very, very sure that. So the thing is, if Bamboo had decided to pull through with this and stay with its thing, if it hadn't gotten that beep storm back, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say the other word here. So I'm going to self-censor.
Yeah.
If they had gotten that huge pushback, then they probably would have gone through with that. And it was not just all a misunderstanding like they tried to make it out to be. And it definitely was not for improving security, but okay. I'm sure someone from the community would have found a way around that. And that is the thing where I'm going with that. The idea is we are a very intelligent and creative community in this whole maker space and this whole 3D printing space. Even if some vendors decide to lock stuff down, I'm sure there will be solutions. And I want to enable these solutions. So this is going to be some work still, but it's already there with like the existing serial communication works through this layer, through this wrapper. And I'm quite confident that I can pull this off. And I think that will be quite nice. And hopefully improve the situation again, because this is the only way that I know right now to fight back against this whole closing things down. Trying to give people the tool they need to maybe get the functionality that they want, that they need out of even lockdown stuff by building some layer that then allows them to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I hope you keep you are successful at that, and that you keep fighting for that more open approach, because I mean, that's what we all are familiar with. And yes, it is scary that in the last year or two, and even I think when Prusa announced the XL, and they've been like one of those people that have been like super open. I mean, they even said, I think that things are changing, and we may have to react to that change, and HB is saying similar things. And like all of these companies, there's a shift in 3D printing that seems like is moving away from that completely open source nature that we all grew up on.
And I mean, I understand that people maybe don't want to play their cards completely open with regards to hardware design and such. But when it comes to the software stack that I'm allowed to use, being forced to use the vendor-approved software with their own branding and such, which usually is like 15 versions behind whatever is actually available in the open source world, this is just going to make things worse. I mentioned I have a vinyl cutter, right?
Yeah.
I explicitly bought one that is not a Cricut because I saw the absolute horrible crap that they were doing with their software stack there. I'm running. I have one that I can just run with an open source Inkscape plugin. I've never installed the official software from that. I couldn't. I run Linux now and it is Windows only, so that would require all VM stuff and such and horrible workarounds. But yeah, this silhouette is just like Inkscape plugin, connects to the printer via USB, to the cutter via USB, runs it, everything is fine. I don't want 3D printing to go the way go the way of vinyl cutters. It's an absolute horrible mess.
Yeah. I mean, and hopefully, again, there's enough of a community that is going to push back. But I mean, that is the complaints that I am seeing more and more. And I mean, it makes sense. I mean, but yeah, when Creality or whoever, like, starts putting in, hey, you got to use Creality print or whatever, and that ends up being, a fork off of something else. They used to always be Cura, and it was just like a super old version of Cura. Now they're doing something that I think looks more like Orca Slicer, but they're doing something that maybe is good when they first released it, and it's only a year back, but like they're not making money from selling software, so they're never going to develop that in a way that is, at the cutting edge. They're always going to be behind. And I mean, I hope, yeah, things don't go that way, because that's also what's made this community great, is people like you, and I mean, people that maintain all these software programs that are open and free and that do continue to develop. And we've seen that even for those, we have to be able to switch freely back and forth, because, I don't know, I mean, everybody, if you were really onto, I don't know, I will throw Cura. I don't use Cura anymore, but like if you were really onto Cura and then you wanted something else, another feature, you either would have to wait, or you would go on to something like, I don't know, Super Slicer, and say, hey, it's got everything. And then a year or two from now, that person gets bogged down and says, hey, I can't develop this actively anymore. And so you move on to something else, and maybe eventually comes back. But like, that ability to freely move back and
Yeah,
forth has been
exactly.
really necessary.
It's also an innovation driver, because people can implement new stuff into Orca Slicer, into Super Slicer, into Cura, even into Prusa Slicer. So like, if it's open, you can hopefully also find a way to contribute.
Yeah.
And if it's in the shape of a plugin, Cura also has a plugin system now, and that is a way through which, like this whole scarf joining stuff that recently came to Slicers, like that was a community contribution, and that is simply not going to happen if you will be required to run your vendor-approved Slicer in version from 2020, and which is the only thing that can produce their DRM G-code files that they then load onto their DRM printers that you can then only run with their DRM filament. So, but this is basically the wet dream of plenty of these vendors out there, I worry. And I mean, obviously, it's going to make support easier. It's going to make sales easier. It's going to make a lot of stuff easier and bring them more money. But it is going to cost us as a community so damn much.
You close the ecosystem and force people, or like not force, but guide them into maintaining, your current ecosystem with more of their products. And
yep.
I mean, that's what also kind of scares me. I mean, but we see like, I mean, you can look at like Thingiverse. I mean, Thingiverse 10 years ago was, I mean, I think there's jokes, it was run off of Raspberry Pis or whatever. Like, I don't think it actually was, but like it felt like it, right? And like, I mean, now you go on, it's a better experience. I don't get that anymore. They probably upgrade their servers because printables came out, because I think they were frustrated. And I mean, Maker World and things, and now all these other things, which I think have also innovated that space. But you can also see where, the potential to lock things down, where people, that use Bamboo Handy on their phone can only use Maker World and press like print from, from their app, and aren't using other things.
Yeah, but
the thing.
I have to say that's also that all of these sharing platforms are all backed by the one or other 3D printer vendor is also something that worries me, to be honest. I would prefer if we had something decentralized that is owned by the community, but yeah. I actually tried working on something like that at some point, but it turned out to be too big of a project to have on the side of OctoPrint. So
I can imagine. Plus, I'm sure a lot of storage, a lot of, servers.
I mean, that is something that you could solve probably with some sponsoring maybe here and there. So, but yeah, like if you're watching this and you're a developer and you're desperately looking for an awesome software project to contribute to the 3D printing space, build some distributed sharing site for printables and laser cut files and whatnot. Like,
yeah,
distributed.
That's the thing too. I mean, we end up getting, like this 3D printing, I think, is unique. And we've looked at, I mean, I've looked at what they've got for laser and CNC, and like, it's not the same. Like, you don't have something like Thingiverse or printables that's that widespread, that has so many models available for these other platforms. 3D printing really is unique in that space.
Yeah.
Gina, we have taken you over the 2 hours, and I said I would try my best not to. I think we've got all the questions from chat. If anything comes up, again, we'll reach out, let you know.
Absolutely.
Is there anything that we missed that you wanted to ask?
I don't think so. Can't think of anything right now.
Okay. Well, Gina, I want to thank you for your time. This was amazing, and I really love talking to you and learning a little bit more about OctoPrint. And again, I feel very fortunate to be able to talk to somebody like you that has really had such an impact in all of our experiences in 3D printing. I know I wouldn't be as happy with my original, printers, my Enders and my, and then even my Prusa and all that stuff, if I didn't have OctoPrint there beside me and using it that way. So thank you personally, and then thank you again for the time, because it really is an amazing opportunity to speak with you.
You're welcome. And yeah, I can only repeat that it was a pure accident that I even got to this point. I just had an idea to scratch my own itch. Like, yeah, things sometimes just happen.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thanks for everyone for joining us, and we will be back soon.
Bye.
Bye.